Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of NHLN Opinion Plus, a weekly series airing every Friday. This is a space for our opinions where we talk about current events and questions the Latino community is curious about. Today, we are joined by Luisa Piette, community activist and corporate communications executive at LHP Communications. Welcome, Luisa. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I hope you're having a good day.
Absolutely, you as well. So today we're going to be talking about the impact of the work that you do and with water sanitation and community activism and advocacy. So any questions before we begin?
I just want to know, are you based out of Manchester? Maybe a silly question.
Yes. With the Latino News Network, the purpose of Latino News Network is to raise awareness on issues that marginalized communities tend to face within New Hampshire. So Manchester, we've done several stories based off of Manchester, New Hampshire, because there tends to be a lot of underrepresentation for not just Latinx, but underrepresented groups. So that's part of the reason why we've done plenty of stories within Manchester, and we hope to continue informing the communities within Manchester and just within New Hampshire as a whole.
Thank you. That's I'm very, very happy that you're doing this type of work. It's so needed in New Hampshire.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So yeah, we can start off by asking Luisa, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of the roles that you are involved in within advocacy and within your experience with broadcast journalism and LHP?
Sure. First of all, I am a first generation American. I came to the United States 30 years ago to work for the federal government as a broadcaster with Voice of America. And I was lucky enough to work there for 5 years. And then I moved on to Texas. Then we lived in Oklahoma. And we also lived in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Virginia. And now we are in Londonderry, New Hampshire. Being a first generation, I would say we're not called Latinx, but I should, because I speak Portuguese and Spanish, and I was actually raised in Portugal. I was born in West Africa, Guinea-Bissau, which was a former Portuguese colony. And my interest in equality and civil rights goes back to my youth. I actually studied human rights law in the UK. I have a law degree, and I'm very concerned about issues of justice, and so I'm so glad that I'm here today to chat with you about how all of this plays out.
Absolutely. First of all, that's a very unique story. So you definitely jumped around between South Africa and then Europe and the UK, and now you're here in New Hampshire. I mean, my family and I were originally from Colombia, and we came here, immigrated as refugees. So we've been working really hard to make that American dream possible. So I wanted to ask though, because so you said that you went to law for human rights. Human rights law. So can you explain more, like what was that epiphany? What triggered your passion for human rights law, and why human rights law versus litigation or any other realm of law?
Right. I got interested going back to my childhood because, not to cut the long story short, Guinea-Bissau used to be called Portuguese Guinea. It was colonized by Portugal. And there was a dictatorship in power. The Salazar regime was friendly with Mussolini of Italy and Franco of Spain and Hitler of Germany. That's the type of regime that I grew up under. And I've seen relatives and friends of my parents either tortured or killed in prison for expressing their opinions. And as a young child, I was almost traumatized by seeing an uncle that I would see one day, and the next day the uncle is dead because the secret police would come after him, or and I would lose a relative that way. So I think it goes back to my childhood. I vowed to fight for justice from the age of 7. And so when I moved to Portugal and then I moved to the UK when I was 17 years old, I decided to study human rights law. My first degree is actually in political science. And then I went on to do law because I wanted to fight for justice, because I think that first things first, if you don't change the laws, you cannot help the populations that we want to help. If the laws are on our side, then it's a matter of having people informed about people's rights and respecting each other's right to live and to have a life equal, that's just for everyone.
That's very, very inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing that, Louisa. And I can see, like, the passion is resonating off of you, and it's a very great reason to see someone very passionate for human rights, and that's what you're doing within the work that you're doing with water contamination and human advocacy. So can you explain more into water contamination advocacy and what type of issues exist
Sure.
within water contamination in New Hampshire?
Sure. It's very interesting that you asked that question. Thank you for asking that question, because since moving to Londonderry 5 years ago, I decided to run for office a couple of times. I ran 3 times. I did not make it because I ran as a Democrat, and this is a very red district where I live. They tend to vote for Republicans. So I did not make it to the State House because my idea was to lift the voices of those that are not represented, people like me, people who look like me. New Hampshire tends to be described as a very not a very diverse state, and there may be a reason. There are historical reasons for that, but in today's world, there is no more excuse for folks to be divided and for people to live in one area because of the color of their skin or their beliefs, and others living in a corner. I think it's the world has pressing issues. We have environmental degradation. We have here in Londonderry, as you mentioned earlier, we have water contamination, which is affecting a lot of homes. Many of my neighbors are now not able to use their wells. So that's part of the reason why I went into politics, and then I joined a group of concerned citizens. It's called the New Hampshire, or actually Londonderry Citizens for Clean Water, because without water we cannot have a healthy population, and it causes a host of health issues, including cancer, including gastrointestinal issues, kidney issues, a number of diseases that water contamination can cause. So that's part of the reason why a few of us got together. We are meeting. We don't have a strong, cohesive group yet, but we're hoping to get there.
That is very, very interesting. And of course, with foul water sanitation, that causes all of these different illnesses. But I'm just wondering, how is do you think that there is a correlation between the political ideology of New Hampshire, how you said it tends to be very, a very right wing, a very red state? How is that related to the issues of water sanitation, or do they impact one another? And if so, can you explain?
Absolutely. I cannot pinpoint directly who's responsible, but I can tell you that some of the citizens that are working with me and with the community works, action works, which is helping us organize and voice our opinions on this issue, because we know that New Hampshire has the highest pediatric cancer in the nation. Out of the 50 states, we have the highest pediatric cancer. There has to be a reason for that. And the reason for that is that there are polluters. Who are these polluters? We need to find out who they are and hold them to account. They need to come clean and clean the water that they've polluted, or provide clean water in some shape and form to my neighbors and to all of us that are being affected. This is an issue that politics has something to do with. We don't know why our elected officials would close their eyes, would let this go on for years. They close their eyes to polluters, meaning some corporations and some textile companies that let the chemicals PFAS is actually they call it the forever chemical. It doesn't go away. And why would these politicians turn a blind eye to what they were doing and let this situation happen? If there were to be more representation in New Hampshire, if I would have to use the word Republicans, if Republicans would allow all voices to be heard and stop gerrymandering so that more people that have different opinions can be elected to office, people that believe in environmental justice, in racial justice, in equality get elected, we would have a better oversight over these corporations.
Absolutely. That's all very, very interesting. So it's like the politics and the political ideology really influences the decisions that are made for the behalf of all people. And just seeing that that New Hampshire has the highest pediatric cancer rate in the entire country is very, very alarming. So with that, I wanted to ask, can you explain why, and you mentioned before that there is low representation for, for certain groups. Can you explain what is happening within the society of New Hampshire, specifically where you're living right now, that is preventing that is preventing certain representation from marginalized groups and is preventing them from succeeding and from reaching that equality level with those that tend to be part of the majority?
Thank you so much. Thank you for asking that question. Number one, is the state welcoming to people that are different? The LGBTQ community, they have the highest numbers of homeless people in New Hampshire. Is housing affordable? How is racism being dealt with? Is there education in the public schools? Are we teaching our children about our history, about slavery, about immigrants and their right to asylum? How do we welcome immigrants? All of this, these are hot button issues in New Hampshire. And I know that here in Londonderry and some of the towns tend to elect more Democrats, but that does not make them non-racist and welcoming to all populations. I had trouble getting a driver's license in New Hampshire. When I moved here, they made me go 5 times to DMV before I got my license, and I had all my paperwork with me. I'm married to a Caucasian man, and I took him with me one time, and I was literally hiding behind him so that he could help me get my license. They made it hard. I had to report it to Concord, to the DMV head office, and they solved the problem. I will not mention which community in New Hampshire, which DMV, because they have changed. They don't do that anymore. But how can you have a diverse population when even the government is racist? The elected officials are openly racist. People do not come here. I had to fight cancer over the past couple of years. I went to the hospital, Mass General, and one of the nurses liked a purse that I had. This is just an interesting story just to highlight how hostile a community and a state can be to a diverse population. She liked my purse. I said, oh, well, this was from the flea market. We have a flea market nearby. Now, the flea market posts hostile, anti-Democrat messages. Before you even enter, they are telling you we are radical red. And so I said, I got this from the flea market. And the nurse said, oh, I'm Latinx. I'm not welcome in New Hampshire. We don't go across the border. We don't go across the border. So we have deep issues. We have to allow CRT, critical race theory, to be introduced in our high schools, introduced in our schools. Whether you call it CRT or anything else, at least observe the Martin Luther King Day, observe the Black History Month, observe the LGBTQ community's holidays and women's holidays. Make sure that all populations are represented, but this is not happening yet. So I feel like I have a mission, and I'm really, really enthused to continue the work that I'm doing in my community to achieve equality and to make everyone feel welcome in New Hampshire.
Thank you so much. I just feel the passion that's resonating out of you. So thank you so much for being so open, Luisa. And I just want to say, so that makes time for us. So first, thank you so much for talking with us, Luisa, and for being our guest on NHLN Opinion Plus. Is there anything else that you'd like to say for our audience before we depart?
I would like to encourage, we were talking about moving to New Hampshire. I would like to encourage a diverse population to move to New Hampshire. And I would like to encourage my neighbors who are affected by contaminated water to join our Londonderry Citizens for Clean Water Facebook page. We have a presence in social media. Please join us, use that avenue, that resource to reach out and talk to your neighbors. Do not be afraid to express your opinions. There is truly freedom of opinion allowed in this country, believe it or not. If you live in Londonderry, you wouldn't think so, but there should be. We should be allowed to interact, to voice our opinions, and to make our society better and more ready to fight the big environmental degradation that we're facing worldwide. They say, the message I would say is, think globally, be aware of what's happening around the world and the planet, and act locally. That's my message. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Luisa, for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And join us for another episode in 2 weeks. For more information about our discussion today, check out our web story on NH Latino News. Follow us on Twitter at NH Latino News and our Instagram at NH_Latino News. I'm Ron Zapata with NHLN Opinion Plus, and we'll see you next time.